Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, February 16, 2023. It's about 2:20 or so in the afternoon here on the East Coast of the United States. These are our hot topics for today. One involves the partial release of a report of a special grand jury in Atlanta, Georgia, investigating the efforts by former President Trump and his lawyers and colleagues to overturn the presidential election in 2020. The other hot topic has to do with debt. So we'll start with the Georgia. This is a special grand jury convened by Fani Willis, who is the well-known, longtime district attorney for Fulton County, Georgia, which includes the city of Atlanta. In Georgia, a special grand jury, which has subpoena powers, they can compel you to testify, does not have indictment authority. So the purpose of this grand jury was to gather evidence and prepare a report. That report was submitted to the presiding judge of the Superior Court in Atlanta. District Attorney Willis argued that the report should not be made public. The judge, for the most part, agreed, but he did agree. He did release three small sections this morning. He released the introduction, the conclusion, and the conclusory portion of a section on perjury. So the introduction just tells us what the purpose of the grand jury is. Nothing new. We knew what its purpose was. The conclusion says that there are a lot of recommendations in the report, but it doesn't say what the recommendations are. It hints that the recommendations are for indictments. The interesting part of this is the perjury section. And again, this is the conclusion of the perjury section. So there are no proper names in there. But the grand jurors are satisfied that one or more witnesses who testified before them testified falsely under oath, knowingly falsely, which is, of course, perjury. And the grand jury recommends that those people be indicted and prosecuted for perjury. Candidly, I was hoping for more. I was hoping there'd be names in there, but I understand why there aren't names in the portions of the report that have been released. It's 400 pages. What was released today, if you put it back to back to back, is about a page and a half. So there is much there that we don't yet know. But we do know that District Attorney Willis will soon begin asking another grand jury that can issue indictments to begin doing so. She has already sent out target letters, that is, letters to people saying, "Here, you're hereby informed that you are a target of the grand jury. If your lawyers want to talk to ours, here's who you can reach and how you can reach them." One of those target letters was sent to Trump's former chief lawyer and the very famous former mayor of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani. So we'll see where all of this goes. None of this is good news for President Trump or for the people involved. To refresh your memory about what happened, this began when President Trump called up Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, and said, "Can't you just find me 12,280 votes? Just go out and find them. If you can't find them, I'll find them for you." Was that an attempt to engage in fraud? Jury will have to decide that, but that resulted in, a much broader investigation. And the district attorney learned that even though Joe Biden legally, morally, and numerically won the state by 12,000 plus votes, the grand jury, having found no fraud sufficient to overturn the election, even though the 16 Democratic electors to the Electoral College were validly, legitimately chosen by a majority of the Georgia voters who voted, 16 Republicans signed documents submitted to the federal government saying that they were the electors. Now, submitting false documents that you've signed to the federal government is, of course, a felony. And those people received target letters, as did the lawyers who orchestrated that, chief among whom was Rudy Giuliani. So that's where we stand. Of course, everybody wants to know, is she going to ask the grand jury to indict the former president? In my opinion, she will. I don't think she would have gone through all of this without coming up with that result. but we'll see where it goes. Debt. So the Government Accounting Office, which is an independent entity created by Congress, I shake my head because Congress likes to create these things that are neither fish nor fowl. They're not in the executive branch. They're not in the legislative branch. They're not in the judicial branch. So they're not recognized by the Constitution, but they exist. They have an office. They have employees. They have a budget. The budget comes from the taxpayers. The Government Accounting Office. This is theoretically independent bean counters who basically tell everybody in the government what things will cost. I don't know why they did this, but they calculated what the government's debt will be in 10 years. Right now, it is 31 trillion. And the Government Accounting Office said at the current rate of 2 trillion a year, we will be 50 trillion. The federal government of the United States of America will owe $50 trillion in 10 years in 2033. So what is the interest on 50 trillion? Well, the interest rates vary because it depends on when you bought the bonds. But if you buy a bond today, the interest rate is about 2.5% to 3%. 3% of 50 trillion a year is $1.5 trillion. That's half the amount of money that the federal government collects in revenue. Half of it will go out immediately to pay interest on debt. That's how sad, sorry, and sick has been the management of the federal government by the one big government party we have. Call it big government party, call it uniparty, whatever you want. It's got a Republican wing and a Democrat wing. The Democrat wing likes war and debt and deficit finance and taxes, as well as deficit financing and individual welfare. The Republican wing likes war and debt and sometimes taxes, but mainly borrowing and corporate welfare. But they both unite around staying in power by mortgaging the future. Those of you who have children, you have grandchildren, you will have great-grandchildren, they will be saddled with catastrophic interest payments on money that has been borrowed and spent today. Example, we are still paying interest on the debt Woodrow Wilson borrowed. It's minuscule by today's standards. He only borrowed $30 billion to fight World War I. Joe Biden just spent $50 billion to supply the Ukrainians with cash and military equipment, all of which is gone. He has another $50 billion in the kitty because the Congress gave him $100 billion to spend. Back to Woodrow Wilson. He borrowed $30 billion. In those days, it was cash literally printed by a printing press. Today, it's done digitally. The Federal Reserve will just add zeros to the accounts of its favorite banks and let them start spending money out of thin air. In those days, they literally printed greenbacks and put them in circulation, which of course caused massive inflation. But we're still paying interest on the $30 billion. The debt has been rolled over, meaning the federal government doesn't owe it to the same persons and entities as those to whom it owed it when it was first borrowed, but it still owes the $30 billion to those to whom the debt has been sold and transferred. How much interest have we paid? $15 billion. $15 billion on $30 billion. That's a 50% interest rate. That's how miserable, incompetent, and criminal has been the management of the federal government by the big government Republicans and the big government Democrats who have together run it in the past 100 years. That's where we are. If anything else comes out on the Trump grand jury, we'll let you know. We will be dark tomorrow, Friday, February 17, because of an all-day commitment that I have. But if there is breaking news, this will be with me. Gary will find the link, and you can go to Judging Freedom and hear me explain it. Or as we get it. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.